The war had lasted for 300 years. Billions of people from hundreds of worlds had died. Entire star systems had become graveyards filled with broken ships and dead planets. The Galactic Coalition, an alliance of 12 alien species, had fought against the Virathi Dominion since before anyone alive could remember. And they were losing. Ambassador Kethra stood in the Great Hall of the Coalition High Council. She was a Valoran, a tall being with blue skin and 4 arms. Her people were known for their wisdom and calm nature, but today, her hands were shaking. Today, she was about to suggest something that would change everything. "We must contact the humans," she said. The hall fell silent. Then it exploded with noise. Council members shouted. Some stood up from their seats in anger. Others looked at Kethra like she had lost her mind. "You cannot be serious," said Councillor Morvith. He was an ancient being, his gray skin covered with the marks of centuries. "The humans are quarantined for a reason. They are too dangerous. More dangerous than the Virathi," Kethra asked quietly. No one answered. The humans had been discovered 200 years ago. At that time, they were a primitive species. They had not yet left their home planet called Earth. They had no faster-than-light travel. They had no contact with other species. By all measures, they should have been simple and harmless. But when the Coalition scientists studied human history, they became afraid. The humans had fought wars against each other that killed millions. They had created weapons that could destroy entire cities in a single flash of light. They had poisoned their own air and water in their rush to build and grow. They split the atom not to create energy, but to create bigger bombs. They had nearly destroyed themselves many times. The Coalition made a decision. They put a barrier around human space. No one could go in. No one could come out. The humans were quarantined like a disease. It was better to leave them alone than to risk what they might become. For 200 years, the humans had been forgotten. The Coalition had bigger problems. The Virathi Dominion had begun its conquest, and nothing could stop them. The Virathi were a hive species. They had one mind that controlled billions of bodies. They did not negotiate. They did not make peace. They only consumed. World after world fell to their fleets. Species after species was wiped out or enslaved. The Virathi have taken the Helion corridor, Kethra continued. In 6 cycles, they will reach the core worlds. If the core worlds fall, the Coalition is finished. Everything we have built over thousands of years will be gone. And you think the humans can help? Morvith laughed bitterly. They are primitive. They were still using chemical rockets when we found them. What can they do against the Virathi? We do not know what they have become, Kethra said. 200 years have passed. We stopped watching them long ago. Perhaps they have grown. Perhaps they've destroyed themselves, another council member said. That would be fitting for such a violent species. Kethra shook her head. Our long-range sensors still detect activity in human space. They are alive. They have expanded. We see energy signatures that we cannot identify. The council argued for hours. Some said the risk was too great. The humans might be worse than the Virathi. Others said there was no choice. Death by Virathi or death by human was still death. But at least the humans might be reasoned with. In the end, the vote passed by a single voice. They would contact the humans. Kethra herself wrote the message. She chose her words carefully. She explained the war. She described the suffering. She asked, with great humility, if the humans would consider helping the Coalition in its hour of need. She offered trade, technology, and territory in exchange. She apologized for the centuries of quarantine. The message was sent through the barrier. Then they waited. Kethra expected the humans to take time to respond. She expected negotiations that would last for months. She expected demands and conditions. Perhaps the humans would want revenge for being isolated. Perhaps they would refuse entirely. Perhaps they would not even answer. The response came in less than 1 hour. Kethra read it 3 times because she could not believe what she was seeing. The message was short. Only 30 words. We've monitored your war. We wondered when you would ask. The first expeditionary fleet is already on the way. Expected arrival, 47 hours. Prepare your wounded. The council chamber was silent as she read the message aloud. They monitored our war, Morvith whispered. They watched us dying for 300 years. They were waiting, another council member said. They were waiting for us to ask for help. Kethra felt cold fear spread through her body. The humans had known about the Virathi. They had watched the coalition struggle and suffer. They had seen billions die. And they had done nothing. But why? What kind of species watches a war and does nothing? Someone asked. A species that does not interfere unless invited, Kethra said slowly. Or a species that wanted to see how bad things would get before they acted. Or a species that was preparing, Morvith added. His voice was barely a whisper now. They had 200 years of isolation. 200 years to build whatever they wanted without anyone watching. 200 years to prepare for exactly this moment. The council members looked at each other with growing horror. What have we done? Someone asked. Kethra did not answer. She was looking at the message again. The first expeditionary fleet. That word bothered her. First, it meant there were others. It meant this fleet was just the beginning. 47 hours. In less than 2 days, the humans would arrive. The coalition had wanted help, and help was coming. But as Kethra stood in that silent hall, surrounded by the most powerful beings in the galaxy, she wondered if they had made a terrible mistake. They had opened the door to human space, and something was coming through. She thought about the human history she had studied long ago. She remembered the wars, the bombs, the endless violence. She remembered how quickly humans had gone from throwing spears to splitting atoms. Just a few thousand years? A blink of an eye in galactic terms. What could they have become in 200 more years? The answer was coming. Ready or not, the humans were on their way, and the galaxy would never be the same. Admiral Yuki Tanaka stood on the bridge of her flagship, the UHS Resolve. She was a small woman with dark hair turning gray at the edges. Her eyes were calm and steady. She had served in the human fleet for 40 years, and she had seen things that would break most people. But she had never broken. Around her, the first expeditionary fleet moved through space in perfect formation. 1,700 ships of all sizes and types, carriers that held thousands of smaller craft, destroyers built for speed and precision, dreadnoughts that carried weapons too powerful to use near inhabited worlds, and other ships that had no names the coalition would recognize. Admiral, her tactical officer said. Coalition observers are requesting permission to board. They want to inspect our ships before we reach the combat zone. Tanaka smiled slightly. Permission denied. They will see what we can do soon enough. Oh. She turned back to the main display. It showed the Helion Corridor, a stretch of space that connected the outer territories to the core worlds. The Virathi had taken it 3 months ago. Over 12,000 enemy warships held the corridor now. The coalition had tried to break through 19 times. Each attempt had failed. Each attempt had cost them hundreds of ships and millions of lives. The humans would try once, and once would be enough. A young Valoran named Tessuri had been assigned to the Resolve as a diplomatic observer. The coalition wanted someone on the human flagship to report what they saw. Tessuri had been chosen because he was brave, or at least that was what his superiors had told him. Right now, he did not feel brave. He felt terrified. For 2 days, he had watched the humans go about their lives on the ship. What he saw confused him deeply. They were not preparing for battle the way coalition soldiers prepared. There was no quiet meditation, no solemn rituals, fear. Instead, the humans laughed and joked with each other. They played games. They ate meals together in loud, crowded rooms where everyone talked at once. Some of them even sang. Tessuri found Admiral Tanaka in the observation deck. She was looking out at the stars with a cup of something hot in her hands. Admiral, he said carefully, may I ask you something? Of course, how can your people be so calm? In less than 1 day, you will face the largest Virathi fleet ever assembled. 12,000 warships. The greatest military force in the galaxy. And your people are laughing. Tanaka took a sip from her cup. What would you have us do? Cry, pray, hide in our rooms. I would expect some fear, some nervousness. Some sign that you understand what you are about to face. Tanaka turned to look at him. Her eyes were dark and deep, like pools of water with no bottom. We understand exactly what we are about to face. We have been preparing for this moment for 200 years. Preparing? You were in quarantine. You were isolated. You were isolated from you, Tanaka said. But we were not idle. Do you know what happened when your coalition put that barrier around our space? We were angry at first. Then we were curious. Then we were grateful. Tesseri blinked. Grateful? You gave us 200 years to grow without interference. 200 years to build, to research, to evolve. We knew about the Vairathi. We watched your war from the beginning. We saw how you fought. We saw what worked and what did not. And we prepared. Why did you not help sooner? Tanaka was quiet for a moment. Because we were not ready. Not our ships. Not our weapons. Us. Humanity. We needed time to change. Change how? We had to learn to control ourselves. Our history is violent, Tesseri. We know this. We have killed more of our own kind than the Vairathi have killed of yours. We built weapons that could have ended all life on our planet. We nearly destroyed ourselves many times. She paused. We needed to be sure that we could use our power without losing ourselves to it. Tesseri felt a chill run through his body. And are you sure now? No, Tanaka admitted. But your people were dying. We could not watch any longer. A voice came through the communication system. Admiral, we are approaching the Helion corridor. The Vairathi fleet has detected us. They are moving into attack formation. Tanaka finished her drink and set the cup down. Good. Let them come. She walked to the bridge with Tesseri following behind her. The main display showed the enemy fleet. 12,000 ships, arranged in perfect patterns. The Vairathi hive mind controlled them all like fingers on a hand. They moved with coordination that no individual species could match. Admiral, the tactical officer, reported. Enemy fleet is charging weapons. They will be in firing range in 4 minutes. Understood. Signal the fleet. Begin deployment. Tesseri watched the human ships change. What he saw made no sense to him. Ships that had looked like simple destroyers began to unfold. Hidden sections opened. Weapons that had been concealed were revealed. Some of the ships were 3 times larger than they had appeared. You hid your true size, Tesseri whispered. We hid many things, Tanaka said. The coalition was watching us. The Vairathi were watching us. We did not want either of you to know what we had built. The dreadnoughts opened their main bays. Tesseri expected fighters to come out. Instead, he saw machines. Thousands of them. They were not piloted by living beings. They moved on their own, controlled by minds made of light and metal. What are those? We call them Reapers, Tanaka said. They are autonomous weapons. They think faster than any living being. They do not feel fear or hesitation. They exist only to destroy. The Vairathi fleet opened fire. Thousands of plasma lances shot across space toward the human ships. Tesseri braced himself for impact. The shots hit the human shields and stopped. They did not bounce off. They did not break through. They simply stopped and disappeared, absorbed into something that glowed briefly before going dark. What kind of shields are those? Tesseri asked. Something new, Tanaka replied. Something we invented during the quarantine. The tactical officer looked up. All weapons charged, Admiral. The fleet is ready? Admiral Tanaka straightened her uniform. Her face showed no emotion at all. She looked at the Vairathi fleet, 12,000 ships that had brought the galaxy to its knees. And she gave a single order. Begin. The human fleet fired, and the universe changed forever. Tesseri had seen battles before. He had served on coalition warships for 15 years. He had watched fleets clash in the darkness of space. He knew what war looked like. What happened in the Helion corridor was not war. It was something else entirely. Something that had no name. The human ships fired their first weapons. Beams of light shot across space, but they were not like any weapons Tesseri had ever seen. They did not burn. They did not explode. They did something far worse. The beams hit the first line of Virathi ships. 3,000 warships, each one larger than any coalition vessel, each one armed with weapons that had destroyed worlds. The beams touched them, and they vanished. Tesuri blinked. He thought his eyes were playing tricks on him. But the sensors confirmed what he had seen. 3,000 ships had simply ceased to exist. There was no explosion, no debris, no bodies floating in space. One moment, the ships were there. The next moment, they were not. What was that? He whispered. Cascade cannons, Admiral Tanaka said calmly. They do not destroy matter. They unravel it. Every atom, every particle, broken down into nothing. Tesuri felt sick. The Coalition had weapons that could destroy ships. The Virathi had weapons that could destroy planets. But the humans had weapons that could erase things from existence itself. The Virathi hive mind reacted instantly. It had never seen weapons like this before. It had conquered 1,000 worlds and defeated 100 species. But it had never faced anything that could simply make its ships disappear. The hive mind gave the order to retreat. 9,000 Virathi ships turned and tried to run. Their engines flared as they attempted to jump into hyperspace. They would regroup. They would analyze what had happened. They would find a way to counter these new weapons. They never got the chance. Interdiction field activated, the tactical officer announced. Tesuri looked at the display. A wave of energy had spread out from the human fleet. It covered the entire Helion corridor. And where that energy touched, hyperspace travel became impossible. That is not possible, Tesuri said. Hyperspace interdiction on that scale is theoretical. The energy required would drain a star. We found a way, Tanaka replied simply. The Virathi ships were trapped. They could not run. They could only fight. The hive mind changed tactics. If it could not escape, it would destroy the humans through sheer numbers. 9,000 ships against 1,700. The numbers were overwhelming. Even if the human weapons were powerful, they could not fire fast enough to stop everything. The Virathi fleet charged forward, every weapon firing. The space between the fleets filled with plasma and missiles and beams of deadly light. It was enough firepower to crack a planet in half. The human shields absorbed everything. Every shot, every missile, every beam vanished into those strange glowing barriers. Not a single human ship was damaged. And then the Reapers attacked. The autonomous weapons that had launched from the human ships moved faster than anything Tesuri had ever tracked. They did not fly in straight lines. They twisted and turned and changed direction in ways that should have torn them apart. They moved like living things, but faster. Much faster. Each Reaper was small, no bigger than a shuttle, but each one carried weapons that could destroy ships 100 times their size. They swarmed into the Virathi fleet like insects attacking a giant. But these insects had stingers made of light and death. Virathi ships began to explode. Not disappear like the ones hit by the cascade cannons, but explode in the traditional way. Fire and metal and bodies blown into the void. The Reapers did not stop. They did not slow down. They moved from target to target with perfect efficiency. The hive mind tried to coordinate a defense. It tried to concentrate fire on the Reapers, but the machines were too fast, too numerous, too smart. For every one that was destroyed, 10 more took its place. The larger human ships fired again, more cascade cannons, more ships erased from existence. The dreadnoughts used different weapons too. Gravitational beams that crushed ships into balls of metal smaller than a fist, quantum disruptors that made ships flicker and fade like dying lights. Things that Tesuri could not understand and could not name. He looked at the time display. 5 minutes had passed since the battle began. 5 minutes. Half the Virathi fleet was already gone. This is not possible, he kept saying. This is not possible. It was happening. Right in front of his eyes. The greatest military force in the galaxy was being destroyed like it was nothing. 10 minutes. 7,000 Virathi ships remained. 12 minutes. 4,000 ships. 15 minutes. 1,000 ships, the hive mind made one final decision. If it could not win, it would take the humans with it. The remaining ships turned and accelerated directly toward the human fleet. They would ram them. They would detonate their reactors at point-blank range. They would die, but they would not die alone. The human fleet did not move. It did not need to. A new weapon activated. Something that looked like a wave of darkness spread out from the flagship. It moved slowly, almost gently. The Virothi ships flew into it, and they stopped. Tazuri watched in silence as 1,000 warships simply froze in space. Their engines were still firing, but they were not moving. Their weapons were still shooting, but the shots went nowhere. Time itself seemed to have stopped around them. "What is that?" Tazuri asked. His voice was barely a whisper. "Temporal displacement field," Tanaka said. "They are trapped between moments. They will stay there until we release them." "Will you release them?" "No. They will fade eventually. A few months, maybe a year. They will not suffer. They will not even know." 17 minutes. The battle was over. The Helion corridor was clear. 12,000 Virothi warships and 6 million soldiers had been erased, destroyed, or frozen in time. Not a single human ship had been scratched. Admiral Tanaka's voice came through the fleet-wide channel. "All ships, stand down from combat status. Medical vessels begin search and rescue operations. Look for survivors." Tazuri stared at her. "Survivors? After that?" "There are always survivors," Tanaka said. "Escape pods. Damaged sections that stayed intact. Beings who found a way to live." She looked at him with eyes that held something like sadness. "We have learned to look for them. It is the least we can do." The medical ships deployed. Hundreds of them, spreading out through the debris field, searching for any sign of life. Tazuri sat down heavily. His legs could no longer hold him. He had just watched the most powerful fleet in the galaxy destroyed in less time than it took to eat a meal, and the humans were already looking for ways to help their enemies. Survive? He did not understand them. He was not sure he ever would. The news spread across the galaxy faster than light itself. Every world, every station, every ship heard the same impossible story. The Helion corridor had been liberated. 12,000 Virothi warships had been destroyed. The battle had lasted 17 minutes. On 100 worlds, people wept with joy. The Virothi had been the shadow that hung over everything. They were the nightmare that never ended. For 300 years, they had taken and killed and consumed. And now, in less time than it took to brew a cup of tea, they had been stopped. But in the halls of power, there was no celebration. There was only fear. High Counselor Morvith sat alone in his chamber, reading the reports that kept arriving from the Helion corridor. Each one was worse than the last. Not worse because of bad news. Worse because of what they revealed about the humans. The first expeditionary fleet was not the main human military force. It was a rapid response unit, kept on standby for emergencies. The reports indicated that the United Human Confederacy maintained 17 such fleets, and those were just the forces they used outside their own borders, inside human space. There were things that made Morvis' blood run cold. Shipyards that covered entire moons. Research stations that operated in dimensions the Coalition did not know existed. Training facilities where every human child learned the basics of combat before they could read. "What have we done?" Morvith whispered to himself. He called Ambassador Kithra to his chamber. She arrived looking tired but also strangely calm. "You've seen the reports?" he said. "I have. The humans could conquer the galaxy in a year. Maybe less. Nothing could stop them. Not the Coalition. Not the Virothi. Nothing." Kethra nodded slowly. "That is true. Then why do you look so calm?" "Because they have not conquered us," she replied. "They could have done so 200 years ago. They could have broken through the quarantine barrier at any time. They chose not to. They waited for us to ask for help. And that does not frighten you." "It terrifies me," Kethra admitted. "But it also gives me hope. A species that waits to be asked is very different from a species that takes what it wants. Meanwhile, aboard the Resolve, Tesori was trying to make sense of what he had witnessed. The battle had ended hours ago, but he still could not process it. He found Admiral Tanaka in the medical bay. Watching as Coalition survivors were treated by human doctors, the Virethi had taken prisoners during the war. Millions of them. They had been kept in ships near the front lines, used as labor or as shields. When the human weapons had destroyed those ships, many prisoners had died. But many had also survived in escape pods in protected sections. The human medical teams had found over 40,000 of them. "You are saving our people," Tesori said. "Of course," Tanaka replied. "That is why we came." "But you destroyed the Virethi without mercy. You erased them from existence." Tanaka turned to face him. Her expression was hard to read. The Virethi chose their path. They had 300 years to stop. They had 300 years to make peace. They chose to keep killing. We did not erase them because we enjoyed it. We erased them because it was necessary. Is there a difference? Yes, Tanaka said firmly. The difference is everything. We could have used those weapons on your coalition. We could have taken your worlds and made you serve us. We have the power. But we do not have the desire. She paused. That is what we spent 200 years learning. How to have power and not use it for conquest. Tesori was quiet for a long moment. Why did you wait so long to help us? Because we needed to be sure of ourselves. Humanity has a dark history. We have done terrible things to each other. We have started wars over land, over religion, over pride. We built weapons that could have ended all life on our planet. We came very close to destroying ourselves. Tanaka looked out at the stars. When the coalition quarantined us, we were angry at first. Then we realized it was a gift. We had time to change. Time to become something better. And have you become something better? Tanaka smiled sadly. I do not know, but we are trying. Every day, we are trying. A message came through the communication system. The Virethi Dominion was sending a transmission. Not to the coalition. To the humans, Tanaka went to the bridge to receive it. Tesori followed her. On the main screen appeared the face of the Virethi Supreme Commander. It was the first time any coalition member had seen the leader of the hive mind. His face was covered in hard plates of armor. His eyes glowed with cold intelligence. Human Admiral, the Supreme Commander said. I speak for the Virethi Dominion. I have watched the recordings from the Helion corridor. I have analyzed your weapons and your tactics. I have calculated the probability of our victory in a continued war. He paused. His armored face showed no emotion, but something in his voice had changed. The probability is 0. We cannot defeat you. We cannot survive against you. Therefore, I offer unconditional surrender. All Virethi forces will stand down immediately. All conquered territories will be returned. All prisoners will be released. We ask only that you allow our species to live. Tanaka stared at the screen for a long moment. You conquered 1,000 worlds. You killed billions of innocent people. You enslaved entire species. And now you ask for mercy? Yes, I ask for mercy. Something my people have never shown to others. I do not expect you to give it. But I ask. Tanaka was silent. The entire bridge watched her, waiting for her response. The United Human Confederacy accepts your surrender, she said finally. Your species will not be destroyed, but you will answer for your crimes. Your leaders will face justice. Your weapons will be dismantled. Your empire is over. The Supreme Commander lowered his head. Understood. It is over. The transmission ended. Tesori felt like he was dreaming. The war that had consumed 300 years had just ended in a single conversation. The Virethi, Dominion, the terror of the galaxy, had surrendered without condition. You showed them mercy, Tesori said. After everything they did, mercy is not weakness, Tanaka replied. Mercy is strength. Anyone can destroy. It takes real power to choose not to. She turned and walked off the bridge. Tesori watched her go, and he realized he was looking at something he had never seen before. A human who held the power to end entire species in her hands, and who chose to let them live. Maybe, he thought, the galaxy had been wrong about humanity. Maybe they were not monsters after all. Or maybe they were monsters who had learned to be something more. Either way, the universe would never be the same. 6 months passed since the battle at the Helion Corridor. In that time, the galaxy had changed more than it had in the previous 1,000 years. The Vyrathi Dominion collapsed completely. Their military power, which had terrified 100 species for 3 centuries, was revealed to be nothing compared to humanity. The Supreme Commander was executed by his own generals, who blamed him for leading them to defeat. The hive mind fractured into a dozen smaller factions, each one fighting the others for control. Within months, the great empire was nothing but scattered remnants hiding in the dark. Corners of space, the coalition began the long process of rebuilding. Worlds that had been conquered were freed. Species that had been enslaved were liberated. Refugees who had fled their homes for generations finally returned. It would take decades to heal all the wounds. But for the first time in 300 years, there was hope. And in the middle of it all were the humans. The United Human Confederacy had asked for nothing in return for their help. No territory, no resources, no tribute, no political power. They had simply asked for a seat at the table, a voice among equals. Nothing more. This confused the coalition more than anything else. Throughout galactic history, the strong had always taken from the weak. That was the way of things. A species with the power of the humans should have demanded an empire. Instead, they asked only to be treated as friends. Ambassador Kethra was the first non-human to visit Earth. She traveled on a human ship, escorted by Admiral Tanaka herself. The journey took 3 days, and during that time, Kethra talked with the humans and tried to understand them. Earth was not what she expected. She had imagined a world covered in weapons and military bases. She thought she would see a species constantly preparing for war. What she found was very different. The cities were beautiful. Tall buildings of glass and metal stood beside parks filled with trees and flowers. Children played in open spaces while their parents watched and smiled. Art and music filled the streets. People laughed and talked and lived their lives in peace. But the signs of the past were everywhere. Museums stood on every continent, filled with the history of human violence. Wars that had killed millions. Weapons that had destroyed cities. Leaders who had committed terrible crimes against their own people. The humans had not hidden their dark history. They had put it on display for everyone to see. Why do you keep these horrible things where everyone can see them? Kethra asked her guide, a young diplomat named David Chin. Because we have to remember, David replied. The moment we forget what we are capable of, we risk becoming it again. Our power comes with a responsibility. We must remember our past so we can choose a different future. Kethra spent 2 weeks on Earth. She visited schools where children learned about the mistakes of their ancestors. She saw hospitals where the sick were treated for free. She watched as humans from different nations and backgrounds worked together on projects that would benefit everyone. She also saw the military. Not the ships and weapons she had witnessed at the Helion Corridor, but the people who served. They were not cruel or bloodthirsty. They were ordinary men and women who had dedicated their lives to protecting others. Many of them hoped they would never have to fight again. When Kethra returned to the coalition, she delivered her report to the High Council. They are not conquerors, she said. They are guardians. They have spent 200 years learning to control their own nature. They did not help us because they wanted power. They helped us because they finally believed they could be trusted with it. High Counselor Morvith remained skeptical. And if they change, if they decide to take what they could so easily seize, Kethra considered the question carefully. Then the galaxy ends. Nothing could stop them. But I do not believe they will change. I have looked into their eyes. I have walked their streets and talked to their people. They are not monsters. They are what monsters could become if they chose to be better. The debate in the council lasted for weeks. Some argued that the humans could not be trusted. Others pointed out that the humans had already proven themselves through their actions. In the end, the vote passed with a large majority. 1 year after the battle at the Hellion Corridor, the Galactic Coalition officially welcomed the United Human Confederacy as a full member. The ceremony was held on a station at the edge of Coalition space. Representatives from every member species attended. It was the largest gathering in galactic history. Admiral Yuki Tanaka attended as the human representative. She had been promoted to Fleet Marshal, the highest rank in the human military. She stood on the stage in her formal uniform, looking small among the towering aliens around her. But everyone who looked at her remembered what she had done. Everyone knew the power she represented. After the ceremony, a reception was held. Leaders and diplomats mingled and talked and celebrated the new era of peace. Fleet Marshal Tanaka stood near a window, looking out at the stars. A young Valoran child approached her. He could not have been more than 10 years old, brought by his parents to witness history. His eyes were wide with wonder and a little bit of fear. "Excuse me," the child said in a small voice. "Are you the human who destroyed the Virathi?" Tanaka knelt down so she could look at him face to face. "I am. Is it true you did it in only a few minutes?" "It is true." The child hesitated. "Does that make you scary?" Tanaka smiled gently. It was the kind of smile that made her look like a grandmother, not a warrior. "I hope so. Because as long as people are a little scared of what we can do, maybe they will also remember what we chose to do instead."
Oh.
"What did you choose?" "We chose to help. We chose to protect. We chose to show mercy when we could have shown none." Tanaka put a gentle hand on the child's shoulder. "That is what being human means. Not the power to destroy. The choice to protect." The child nodded slowly. The fear in his eyes faded, replaced by something else. Understanding, perhaps? Or hope? Tanaka stood and looked out the window again. 1,000 stars shone in the darkness. 1,000 worlds finally at peace after 3 centuries of war. And watching over them all, humanity. They had entered the galactic stage not as conquerors, but as guardians. They had proven that power and compassion could exist in the same heart. They had shown the galaxy that even the most violent species could learn to be better. The universe had changed. And for the first time in a very long time, that change was for the better. Fleet Marshal Yuki Tanaka allowed herself a small smile. Her work was far from over. There would always be threats. There would always be dangers. There would always be someone who needed protecting, and humanity would be there, watching, waiting, ready to do whatever was necessary to keep the peace, because that was what they had chosen to be. That was what it meant to be human.